This is going. I'm gonna have so much work editing. All right. Hello, everyone. You are listening to episode 325 of the At Percussion podcast. I am your host, Ksenija Komljenović, and with me are my splendid friends, Ben Charles.
Hey, Ksenija, how are you?
Hey, Ben, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. It's good to be back home after my travels to your place. It was nice to see you in person, even if we didn't manage to get a picture together.
Second time's a charm. We'll do it in a couple of weeks, definitely. It was great to have you here. The students loved it. Thanks so much for coming and laying down the law of playing. Yeah, awesome. Caleb Pickering, what's up?
Bravo, kako si?
Zdravo, dobro sam. Kako si ti?
I don't know how to answer it. I just know how to say hello, how are you? I learn one Serbian phrase every time we do an episode, so we're off to a great start.
Most of them are curse idioms.
Yeah.
Right?
I only know curse idioms and hello, how are you?
That's all you need to speak normally. Also, I just want to preface, if there are any people who do speak Serbian, I apologize that for some reason I wanted to sound like an American struggling to speak Serbian. So that's not my actual accent. I still speak fairly well. And then we have our buddy Tracy Wiggins. Tracy, what's up?
I'm just sitting here being old.
Oh, no.
This is just tying it all into the last one I was on. So no, it's good. We've reached Easter break, and so everybody's trying to catch their breath before the last couple of weeks of classes. So
good. Well, hang in there. We're almost there. All right, everybody. So we're releasing this episode on April 21st, and I get to tell you what happened in music history. I feel like I'm really lucky that nothing happens. And I can't keep up with Ben's Bach or Nacht, which is atrocious if you speak German. Or
Bach or Night.
Does not make any sense. We're all about Dadaism around here. And then Caleb's, what was it? Handel Scandal.
And Carly had one too, Beethoven or Beethoven.
Y'all are great for puns for old people. Anyway, the thing that happened on this day was that the Beatles and the Rolling Stones met some 60 years ago. Actually, I think it's 59 years ago exactly today. So what do you all think? Beatles or Rolling Stones?
Beatles.
Okay, and we have a winner. The Beatles. Of course, everyone knows the Rolling Stones are just like an awesome musical marriage. Probably hate each other. Not great music. No, just kidding. The Rolling Stones are great. Don't write hate mail if you like the Rolling Stones. But I'm glad we all agreed that Beatles is where it's at. All right. So we're here to talk about search committees. We have a lot of friends of the podcast, listeners who write and say, hey, we need help and we need to figure this out. And obviously the system has, well, its infrastructure is interesting and it has many flaws, but we want to help. And I get to ask all the questions this time because I've never been on a search committee. I won a job. I got one job interview and I was lucky to get it, but I have never been on the other side. So I have my friends here who are going to teach me all about it because they've all done it multiple times.
Or at least one time currently.
There you go. Just started, but still, it's all fresh, so you can help out. So for all of those who are not sure, of course, we're describing mostly the job interview process in the US. Some of these things might happen in other places as well, but we're talking about America. So why don't you tell us what the process is of like getting the paperwork and so on? Because we can agree that the process begins with a person sending an application, and that application might need, or it definitely needs, a CV or a resume, a cover letter. It might need some videos, and it might need like a teaching philosophy. And please correct me if I'm missing anything. So Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was going to say a couple of things just to get us started off here. One, we did discuss this a bit, not as extensively as today, many episodes ago with John Parks, which I actually didn't look up what number that was, but it was probably like episode 28 or something. It was way early on. We talked with John Parks about this. So there's some more info there, and John is wonderful. And if you look at how many people from Florida State get jobs, it's pretty clear that he knows what he's doing. But I was just going to sort of introduce the process from both sides of the equation, especially if you're a college student listening, wondering how this works. So from the applicant's perspective, there are job listing sites, and Caleb just looked it up. It was episode 19 was John Parks. But for the applicants, there are job listing sites. One of the most common ones is higheredjobs.com, and you can search for percussion on there, and there will be job listings that pop up. And of course, you submit an application. Often there are supplemental materials asked, like a diversity statement, a statement of teaching philosophy, recordings, of course, your CV, and a cover letter are all pretty common to be asked on those. And so once your application gets in, it gets sent to the committee at the university to review, and then they narrow it down to maybe 8 people or so, maybe 4 to 8 for Zoom or phone interviews, and then they bring 2 or 3 people on campus. From the employer's side, usually the department chair will select a committee chair, and then either the committee chair or the department chair will select a committee. It's usually an odd number of people, so they don't end up with a tie. And those people will sometimes be involved, hopefully be involved with the writing of the job posting. And then once the applications come in, you can imagine that they get to review all the applications and materials and narrow them down that way. So I think Tracy had something to add to that.
Yeah, I think the other thing is that at least where I am, there's before any of that, as far as like putting the search out or anything happens, there's actually the committee has to meet with HR, because they have to go through all of the diversity and equity and all of that information to make sure that they're targeting as wide of a breadth of people for potential candidates as they can get also. And so I know we usually have input as to all the places that the search is going to be distributed and everything. And that's all done in a meeting with HR before we ever even finish writing the description.
Yeah, funny enough, I'm in my first year in Northwest Missouri here, and I am on my 3rd search committee. So we have had a lot of new hires this year and coming up for the upcoming year. And just like Tracy was saying, it's funny how there's been jobs I've applied for and read that I thought, wow, that's kind of strange, how they phrase something, but oftentimes that's not in our hands. That's in the university's kind of boilerplates. They have to have this for every single thing. Like here, we were unable to put a preferred qualifications and minimum qualifications. The university wants us to just have qualifications. So, I think when you're looking at those applications, when you're looking at those advertisements, sometimes you have to remember that some of the verbiage can be out of the hands of the people who are hiring the job.
That's very, very well said. So let's talk about decoding the job announcement. The sort of information that you do put out there. Can you help us figure out, is it important? Because I have seen some jobs that do have minimum requirement and preferred requirement. Is it important that we fill out, sort of check every box? Or how do you sculpt those? Like, tell us, how should we decode that stuff that you're sending out to us?
Yes, it's this is one thing that I learned is like your cover letter, like everyone has their generic cover letter that they're probably swapping out some things, hopefully remembering to swap out the school name. But there are very specific things that they're looking for. And I was actually amazed, and I've probably been guilty of this myself, but starting to review cover letters, how many of the cover letters didn't actually address what was asked for in the posting. So like we're looking for a teacher of theory. So we get a lot of applicants with composition degrees, which is fine and I think relevant. But if you only talk about your composing and you don't talk at all about your teaching or your curriculum development, you really haven't spoken at all to the requirements of the job. And I will say that no matter how much you want to get a job, if you do not match up with what they're looking for, like let's say, just making up something here, they're looking for a flute professor that can also teach music theory, and you have no background in music theory at all, and in your DMA you studied flute performance and music business. That's not the job for you, and unfortunately you're not going to get it because you have no theory background at all. Now, if you have something that you can spin into, well, I was a TA for a theory class, then like maybe that works. But if you cannot directly speak to the musical or music related things that are listed, it's probably not a good fit for you.
Yeah, kind of to tag on to Ben slash maybe contradict him at the same time. Hey Marco, what's going on, dude?
Hey y'all, how's it going?
Marco has joined the chat. We are mid in the heat of it.
Cool, let's make it about me. Let's do it.
Okay. Yeah. So why do you choose not to cover up your timpani in the back? No, I'm just kidding. Who covers timpani anymore?
Because I actually practice them.
Oh, that's good.
Oh,
That's good. Oh man, that was sharp. Let's end the episode there. But
what are you practicing? What are you practicing, Marco? You got a little weird drum set up there.
Oh, I'm not currently practicing. I'm practicing my words right now.
Okay.
Yeah, no, we just moved them today, so it's fine. We'll get over it.
anyhow,
Sorry, Caleb, what were you saying?
back to kind of what Ben was talking about. So to agree and disagree, we're in the middle of hiring we are looking for a vocalist slash music theorist, which is a narrow pull. There are not a ton of people that have both of those right in a line. But we have had a lot of people that, like Ben was saying, they're a good singer and a good applied teacher, and maybe they taught theory tutoring or had a GA where they assisted and helped out, and they've spun it where it's just like, yeah, I'm, especially here at a regional institution, if someone's willing to learn and help, we can help them develop that skill set, but maybe they're a great classroom teacher and they just need some help developing the core component. We are much more likely, we have 2 people we're interviewing that have not taught a theory class before. One has, but it was a long time ago, and the other has a huge track record for just good classroom teaching. And so we're kind of banking on, there's someone who is a good teacher and can convey knowledge well and help the student or help assess the students, and I'll help them out with the theory side when they get here, should they be hired. Benji?
Yeah, and like to sort of synthesize Caleb's point and mine, like even if you don't have theory experience necessarily, you have to speak to your ability to teach it. So spinning something that you have done into it, I think, was my point. Not that you have no chance, if you, especially at a regional university, like that, if you don't have theory teaching experience or whatever.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's kind of the thing of, we've all got, or for the most part, we've all got a wider range of skill sets that it may not always directly, like box by box, check every single thing that's in that description. But if in your cover letter, you can talk about how I've had these experiences that I could apply to doing whatever this other thing is that you've got in the description or whatever. I think that's kind of what they're talking about with the spinning it. Not trying to convince the committee that even though you've never taken a single Schinker class in your life, you'd be more than awesome to teach Schenkerian analysis. So it's just kind of like using what skills you've got available and how you can kind of like fit them into the description. And I would just throw in also that I think that applies to, even before you start looking for jobs, get as wide a range of different experiences and stuff like that that you can draw from as possible. Because I can sit here in my chair right now and say that if I hadn't have done the marching thing and march drum corps and stuff like that, that has opened every single job door that I've had to this point. So I think the more experiences that you can get, the more, if you get a music ed degree as an undergrad, it opens up more things that you can teach at the college level. It makes you more marketable at the college level. If you've done the marching thing, marching band is a thing at most universities. So being able to say, I can help with this, or I can do something with this. Studying jazz drum set, a lot of times these descriptions are going to talk about, needing somebody to work with jazz students or take it, so the more things that you accumulate before you ever even start thinking about actually applying for the job, the more of those boxes you're going to be able to check as you go, and the more doors will open.
I do think one thing to keep in mind, though, obviously having the wide array of experiences that you can draw upon is obviously really important, especially as a percussionist, which that's kind of the name of our job. But I will say that being on the other side now, seeing situations where someone, has some experience, but it's maybe not necessarily enough in an area, trying to build that out and make it sound like it is can be a major misstep. And on a committee that I was recently on, we've had people who in their cover letters, implied that, I guess I could actually say, because basically at my university, it's a preference that faculty can speak Spanish. And it's not required, but it's nice if you can speak Spanish, right? And we had someone who mentioned like, hey, I can teach in Spanish. Like, I'm not a fluent Spanish speaker, but I can teach in Spanish. And then when we ended up interviewing them, we found out that that meant they had one time given like a 5-minute talk in a master class in rudimentary Spanish to one person. And that's a lot different than teaching a collegiate course in Spanish. And they were actually a pretty strong candidate, but it was like, what else are you faking? If you made a big deal out of that to us. And so it was like a major kind of, I wouldn't necessarily say a red flag. They still seemed like a lovely person, but that was an issue.
Yeah. And I would say also, to follow up just to that too, the internet is a thing. It exists. And the further that you try to stretch your skills are, the easier it's all going to break down on you, because it's way too easy to, through social media and everything else, to be able to start ascertain how true a lot of that information really is too.
Thanks for teaching me and our listeners about all of this stuff, everybody. Also, there was Marcos Schirripa right there who joined us, the man with the best hair in the room. And there's a lot of great competitors in the room, I will say. So what would you say to a person who looks at that job description and realizes they have 6 out of 8 points that the job asks? Should they address them in the cover letter saying, I don't know anything about this, but I'm willing to learn, or should they just ghost it, or what? Go, Caleb.
I think it's fine to address it to the point that you can do it. We've had several in this job here. I mentioned about voice and theory, that one person was like, yeah, I'm not a theorist, but I have, I would be comfortable teaching theory based on my experiences in theory classes and other classroom teaching. I know I'm a good teacher and I'm good at theory. So, A plus B equals C. I'm pretty sure I might not be as good as someone who has a PhD in theory pedagogy or a cognate in theory pedagogy, but, I would be comfortable teaching that course. And for us here, we keep mentioning regional institutions. For us here, that that's pretty attractive, that someone who's maybe kind of green to college teaching, but they're someone that can teach well, and that will be flexible, and is willing to follow follow the lead on, hey, here's the terminology we use, here's the textbook we use, here's kind of our sequencing. And I think a lot of I know Ksenija and I and Marco and Ben, not so much Tracy, are kind of at similar sized institutions. Tracy's is a bit bigger overall, in my opinion. But yeah, and we're not we have had the issue here where we have concerns every now and then with an applicant where it's like, okay, this person is a very good player and a very good teacher. Are we going to keep them? Are they going to stay here for that 5 years to get tenure or 6 years to get tenure? Or are they going to win another gig and move on because we can't afford to do this search again? So there's a lot of things that come up, but Marco's got something.
Well, yeah, actually, what you literally just said, I actually find that to be a really valuable thing to discuss, because I had a search that literally just ended. Like, we made a hire this week. It actually went very well, very successful search. We had a ridiculously talented applicant pool. We were actually kind of like, whoa, all these people are applying here. And there were actually a few names that came up in the discussion where it's like, should we even bother interviewing this person? Like, would they even take this job? Would they take this rank? Would they take an assistant professor rank? Like, look at their resume, and obviously age doesn't play a part in it, but it's very clear they had been doing this a long time and had accomplished a lot. And we talked about that, but one of those people we said that about ended up being who took the job, because you don't know why they're applying for the job. You don't know what their life goals are. For all you know, their significant other got a job in the area and they're going to live there the rest of their lives. So it's the same thing that one of my teachers told me when they were coaching me and applying for positions, where it's like, don't count yourself out of the job until you have the contract on the table in front of you. Just because you don't think you're going to get this job doesn't mean you shouldn't apply for it, or just because you don't know if you want it doesn't mean you shouldn't necessarily interview, because for all you know, you're going to get a contract for $130,000 a year and they'll fly you back and forth. That's
doing
not
that well, huh, Marco?
that's not what's going to happen, but you don't know that. And if you get an interview, then you get to eat free food at a lot of the good restaurants. So if nothing else, you get a nice little trip out of it.
I mean, that's similar to, like, in our studio class today, we were talking about the audition process, not necessarily for like collegiate jobs or whatever, but more from like the orchestral side and stuff like that. And one of the things I told them is, you don't know who else is taking that audition. And the only way that you guarantee you're not going to get the job is by not taking it. It's the Michael Jordan thing. I miss 100% of the shots I don't take. Right.
So, Michael Scott. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And so I think that's an important point too, is that the only way you positively take yourself out of the running for any position is not applying for it. Because it's, as Marco was saying, you're going to have people that are applying for jobs purely as leverage at their current job, because they're trying to get a pay bump or they're trying to get a promotion or something like that. You're going to get people that, like my situation, I was in a job for 11 years and I came here because we went from being 12 hours away from our family to 2 hours away from our family. And so you're always going to have like situations where people in different life stages and stuff like that, where that you don't know what's going to be playing into the mix there. And also what I tell my students is, that's not your problem. That shouldn't even enter into your mind. If you feel like you're the person for the job, go for the job.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have already shared some horror stories of, like, just make sure that you put the right school name in your cover letter and that kind of thing. Yes.
100%. I teach at the University of North Alabama, not the University of Northern Alabama, North Alabama University, nor Northern Alabama University. And we have seen all of those in cover letters recently.
And I'm in Stephenville, not Stevensville.
So pay attention, treasure your literacy, and just proofread everything 10 times and ask someone else to do so as well. But our buddy Matt Nichols asked, what are common mistakes that candidates make that pull them out of the running early? So let's say that this is still in that paper reading stage, that you're, checking out their CVs and cover letters. What else is a common mistake?
So I can't speak to every university for sure, but we try to make it as objective as possible in the first stage, because, we want to like evaluate as objectively as we can before we really meet the people and talk to them. So we use a rubric that, a point rubric. But some of the first ones, and I've looked at so many this year. The amount of badly formatted CVs and cover letters and etc. is pretty astounding. It almost comes down to people that have a really well put together portfolio and those that don't. And based on that alone, the field is like cut in half. I mean, things like spelling mistakes, having weird colors and designs in the background, and just strange things for a job in academia. Not to make it sound elitist, because it's not in this instance. It's just like, yeah, if you're applying for a college gig, maybe don't have a huge custom made yellow spirally banner that flows across the page. It's just a little strange, but yeah, we've been able to narrow our pool down 50% based solely on things like that. Because I mean, it's kind of like, hey, can I trust you to teach freshman theory 1 and 2 if you can't put together, formulate a coherent thought in a cover letter? Granted, I'm someone who can't formulate a coherent thought out loud on a podcast, but besides that, yeah, it's surprising how I think John Parks in that episode, I don't want to misquote him, but in the first episode 19 talks about in the first stage, the competition is cut in half because half the people aren't qualified. And that sounds bad, but we had lots of people that only had a master's that applied, and unfortunately it's a tenure track job, so we have to have someone with a doctorate to keep that tenure track line, and just little things like that.
So yeah, I think that it's a little bit subjective, because in a way, you don't know exactly what they're looking for in some, I've been in situations where I heard I didn't quite like the vibe they gave off when they said this. And it's you can't really numerically measure vibe. Vibes maybe, but not vibe. And so it's they didn't mention this one aspect we were hoping that they would mention. It's that's true. And that's definitely a deal breaker, but they didn't necessarily know they had to mention that. But as far as things that are pretty clear, the big one is, I'm pretty sure this is true for everyone, we spend forever writing the job description, and all the stuff there has to be approved by 8,000 people. We change to an, we go through and change all little pieces of wording just in case it could possibly be misconstrued. So follow the job description, address the job description. If you leave out one of the major points of the job description in your, one of the bullet points, we put that bullet point there for a reason. We want you to address it because we want the person we hire to do these things. And so that's a big one. If they just straight up didn't mention recruiting at all, well, that's the most important part of your job, because the reason you have a job is because we can, recruit people. And then, give us what they asked for. The other thing is like Caleb said, kind of in a similar vein, weird, colorful CVs, stuff like that. I mean, if it's good information, it looks nice, I mean, I guess whatever. But the bottom line is it should be very clear that you put effort into it. If you send us your performance videos for a applied teaching position, and you might be an amazing player, but you send terrible quality videos where we have to sit there with a microscope and figure out if you're actually good or not, it takes a long time to review applications. And we're not there to try to figure out what it was supposed to be, right? And then the last thing is, when you get to that first round interview, a lot of the questions are canned and are pretty much the same every time. And a lot of them are the questions where no one really cares about the answer, because there's a correct answer or something like that. And just to make sure that, you do your research. When they ask you the inevitable question of why do you want to work here specifically, we all know the reason you want to work there is because you really want health insurance and you haven't been to the dentist in 15 years. But you have to tell us why you want to work here, right? And so you need to do your research. We're expecting that you did your research on the university.
Wow.
Yeah, and I would say that, I mean, along with that too, it's a simple thing at the beginning, but just actually following the directions. Like, turn in the things that they ask you to turn in. Don't turn in more than you're asked to turn in. Turn in what specifically you're asked for. Have, make sure you're applying to the correct school. And I mean, this is an example too. Make sure that when you use your canned cover letter, that you get all of the things where you change the names in the cover letter, because I have actually seen people have like multiple schools in the cover letter before because they just didn't pay attention to it. And I mean, it sounds like I'm kind of joking, but these are things like, these are the things that are going to get you from this pile to this other pile that they're not even, because on the initial read through, you want the facts. Like, you want a vita or a resume or whatever that gives you very clearly the facts of what you've done, where you've gone to school, who've been, stuff like that. And it needs to be in a way that we can very easily get the information that we want. Because we're at the initial stages, we're using a rubric like what Caleb used, and we're sorting it into piles. Yes, maybe, probably not, and then that's where we're deciding where we're going to start to go into more depth with who we're actually really going to look at. So
I've kind of have mixed feelings on the whole applied teaching or classroom teaching videos, because they're often so curated. They're like so hyper, like people only present the absolute best. And if something went wrong, then they'll redo the lesson or they'll use a different video.
I just want to be clear. I was referring specifically to performance videos.
Yeah. Sorry. No, I should have specified. Yeah, in terms of applied teaching or teaching videos, we've gotten several here though that when I applied, they asked for 2 applied teaching videos. I only had 1 lesson, so I sent a masterclass video, and that worked out. But we've had, I didn't think it would be a thing, but we've had a shocking amount of numbers of applicants that when it says applied teaching video, they submit like a student performance in a lesson. So we see their students' ability, but we don't see them like critiquing and interacting with the students. I don't know if that's a common thing, but this year it has been very common for us. We've seen, I mean, dozens of those types of things. Ben, I think you had something very small to add.
So, well, actually, you actually made me think of another point. But I was going to say that, yeah, if you're a graduate student in particular, it's relatively easy to churn out a cover letter the night before it's due, but it's impossible to make a teaching video or a performance video like within a week of applying for something. Like, you have to have those on file. So I would highly advise getting those done and on file and keeping them current. So maybe every year doing a new teaching video and keeping a couple of recordings in place. But going back to Matt and Nichols' original question of like, what are some things that some mistakes that knock people out early on? One of the things for us was errors on teaching videos. And so we actually had one of our semi-finalist candidates that was really strong, that many of us liked. And on his or her teaching video, they did a tonicization. Again, this is teaching oral skills and theory. And they sang incorrect pitches. They did the correct solfege, but wrong pitches. And it was one spot on the video. And it was such a small thing, I didn't even notice. But one of our other faculty members pointed out, like, this is a content area error. You cannot have that on your video. And so that unfortunately knocked that very qualified candidate out, which in my opinion might be a little harsh, because we're not hiring a vocal professor. You might sing out of tune every now and then, but that was something that just clearly to some people on the committee was too tall of a hill to overcome.
We did, I don't mean to jump the gun, but we did have someone that applied for my job that I have now. I of course won't say who it is, but our department head is a percussionist. And during the percussion methods teaching parts, I think something went awry, and they said something that was very not correct about snare drum grit. And our percussionist our department head was like, huh, that's bizarre. So yeah, you
Was
never
it
know.
Casey? Was it
It
Casey?
was Casey. It was actually Ksenija and Casey together. They interviewed.
I was going to throw in there too, something that on the paperwork and stuff like that, just because you've been in the same room as someone and maybe played for them for 30 minutes for one lesson one time does not mean you studied with that person. And this is one that I see a lot. Like if somebody will put, they played on a master class or something like that, and suddenly the next thing you know, they studied with that individual, right? You can put that you had a coaching with someone or that you had a lesson with someone or something like that. But studying with someone implies a longer commitment and a longer amount of time working with that individual. And that's
Yeah,
one that I
Michael
think that's an easy
Okay.
mistake to make, I think, but I see it a lot.
I was going to say, if Michael Burrett's phone rings, like if you studied with him, he's going to know who you are. It's not like, yeah, I think maybe they played for me in a masterclass one time, maybe. Yeah, like studying with someone is definitely what Tracy is saying.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, like I was talking about too, that's so easy to check because our world is so small. Like if you tell me that you studied with, Ben Charles, I'm going to call Ben.
Probably not very good.
That's beyond that's what's that. I'm going to call Ben and find out, what can you tell me about this person? It's too easy to check that information now.
So last thing about cover letters, let's say that you have visited that institution or you have a friend who goes to school there or teaches there. Do you suggest to name drop and say, hi, because of my friend who happens to teach clarinet there, I know that this is an awesome place and I would love to join it? Or do you think that that is off color to do?
No way. I would say no way.
Don't do it?
I wouldn't mention it in the cover letter
Yeah.
necessarily.
I would just mention it directly to that person, and then they can tell the committee that.
Having an advocate on the ground can be super useful, but I don't know that it's the right context there.
I will say though that I can say this. So one of the people that we just hired just so happens to have a brother who is also a professor here in a different department, like science related stuff. And they did mention in their cover letter, I'm very familiar with the area and I know all this stuff because my brother works there. And it wasn't like name dropping. It was just mentioning is like, this is why I know all these things. So I actually have firsthand. And I think we actually kind of saw that as a positive. It's like, oh, you actually do know about this place because you have literally been here before in a non-academic context. But that's a very outlier, like random situation. Yeah, the one thing that I wanted to add had to do with talking about mentioning who you studied with and being able to call that person, call Michael Burrett and see if you actually studied with him. And I want to just reiterate how true that is. On more than one occasion, I've received phone calls from percussionists in our community that I've never met in person before to ask me about people that they knew I know. Candidly, like, hey, this isn't like an official reference call, but I know you know this person. Like, what can you tell me about them? Because we have these questions. This is informal, but I would like to know, what you think about this person so we can see what they're saying is true. And more than one occasion, literally from percussionists that I've never spoken to in person before they called me.
I was going to say also to follow up on this, what Mark was talking about, when you apply for things, you should be applying as a professional, not a student or a former student. So I don't think that name dropping your teacher is really all that helpful. And I would assume that if you went to Yale, that you probably studied with Robert Van Cise, or if you went to Eastman, you probably studied with Michael Burrett. That name dropping a professor, I don't think really means all that much in the professional context of things. And also, outside of the percussion community, I don't know how many flute players are going to know who that is.
I'd just like to also add that for everything that we or the room mostly agrees on, one of us knows of an example where someone did the exact opposite and it worked for them. So like this thing, what Ben just said, don't name drop your professor. I know of a person who has been heavily name dropping the school where they go, and that's literally most of their cover letter from what I saw, years ago. It's just like, I went to this incredible program, and so, I'm worth it, and it has worked. So again, it really is, this is almost like, I feel like this is like we're trying to teach you how to date, and all of this stuff is a little bit like speed dating, like you're scrolling through people and just like rushing through things, trying to get to know who are the candidates that you want to have there. So for every rule, there's a...
I was gonna say, what you said though is the school. Like, yes, your school carries a lot of weight. Trying to like, I think where your degree is from does matter, but trying to impress someone by saying I studied with a professor at the school that I went to is less impressive, is what I'm saying. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. But I still, again, I know that I literally know a person who did something else and it worked for them. So the school and the person meant a lot. So that they went hand in hand. But point being, take everything with a grain of salt, and we hope that things don't always work out in the same way, and that, you should know that you always do have something going for you. So Jade Hails, our buddy, thanks for your question, Jade. Asked a similar question to Matt's, which is, what are some red flags or things to avoid when a university job is your end goal? What can be considered beneficial, meaningful work for the portfolio versus a waste of time in regards to the hiring process? And I think we've agreed on a lot of stuff, like you want to do as many things as possible. And, I think the only thing that will work against you is if you don't do anything.
I was going to say, the only thing I think I could add to that, like red flags, for younger people, maybe there are people that say, oh, well, I can't pay you, but you should do this for the experience. And maybe you get sucked into doing a bunch of office work for a music festival that you aren't really getting any real, even administrative experience, something like that. I think for younger people, that could be a thing to look out for, is doing things for the experience points.
True. In an ideal world, we would love to stop the experience transactions and always include money, because guess what? If you work and you work for money, you still get experience. It's the same amount of experience. So you can give me experience with the cash. I think that's a great thing. Our friend Marcelina Suchocka asked, why do they seem to prefer academics, people with 5 DMAs, instead of performers? Have you encountered anything like this?
Yeah.
Why?
We're a regional institution. We're not Yale. We're helping people become music educators, K through 12 educators, recording studio folks who are working in studios, and record labels, music therapists. It's not about who can play it is about the art, but at the end of the day, we have a lot of our people here don't have DMAs, they have PhDs in music education. I think it totally depends on the gig, right? Like Yale, you better be able to play your ass off if you're going to be on Bob Van Sice's level. But yeah, some place like I'm at now, or where Ksenija is, or Marco, or Ben even, it's just like, y'all have performers that are coming out of those programs, but I have a feeling that all the three of y'all, and Tracy as well, we're putting out a lot of music educators, and they don't have to be playing con variations at the end of 4 years. I know that's like a controversial topic, that, oh, you don't have to play, like, oh, my students can play a good bossa nova, but they can't play con variations. Well, yeah, okay. But yeah, why not? There's nothing wrong with being an academic. I don't think at all. I think the word academic, might get misconstrued. Like, if you're an academic, are you someone that's actually an academic? Like, are you doing research and studies and like diving deep? But yeah, why hire? I don't think you have. Sorry, I'm rambling again. I'm doing the Trump thing we talked about last night. This is the greatest podcast, the best. Many friends know this podcast. They're great guys, all of them. But yeah, I don't think you have to be the top Yale performer to get a gig. Like, you have to be a good teacher. And yeah, sorry, I'm not putting out people that are like slaying velocities yet. So most of my freshmen barely read music, and that's fine. So I got to get them from there to where they need to be a high quality music educator, and we'll get to where we get. But I don't have to be a top end performer for that, in my opinion.
I've thought and discussed with people a lot about this exact question, like, why do you have to have a doctorate to get this job, and things like that. Like, I have so much playing experience, like, why am I not getting the job for my practical experience? And I think that that's a little bit of a generalization. It's not really fair to make that argument, because that's not necessarily true. Like at Indiana, when I had 4 percussion teachers there, 2 of them had master's degrees and 2 of them didn't even have bachelor's degrees. Well, at least in music, so they did have people because they were absolutely world-class, amazing at what they do. But I think one of the things to think about is it's not just about playing when you become a professor, especially in a tenure track role. I think traditionally the role of a professor is a researcher and someone that does, that sort of stuff. And teaching is also part of the job. And I think that goes with, obviously the role has evolved over time, but that's part of it. Your research and your playing is research, but also your ability to write articles and make publications and recruit students. And you don't recruit students. We all know this, that you don't recruit students by being a badass player. That doesn't hurt. That definitely doesn't hurt. But unless you're teaching, and even at the major huge schools like Eastman, they still have to get students to go there instead of the other big schools. It's not just about that. And so I think it's important to remember that there's a lot more that goes into it than just your playing and teaching ability. That, when you get the doctorate and when you've gone through academia, you have a better concept of how to navigate academia for the students. And again, I don't mean to make a generalization about that, but I think it is important to remember that there is a lot more to the job, that's why some of those people may get overlooked.
I'm going to take a slightly different tact at this, in that a lot of the time, it's not the people in the music department that are deciding that a doctorate is required. Because honestly, it's, at least here, and I bet it's this way at a lot of other schools, it's the accrediting agencies that have a huge amount of influence and power and control over how a school can hire, what the requirements are for a school to hire, because the school's wanting to keep their accreditation, because their accreditation is what keeps students being able to be licensed, et cetera, et cetera. And so like we all know cognitively that there are people, I studied with Nancy Zelsman. She has a bachelor's degree and she's as good as there is. And I know for a fact that because of the accrediting agency SACS, it would be a ridiculous amount of work for us to be able to get her hired to teach you. That honestly, some schools, there's administration that is well above the department that's making these decisions. And so a lot of times when you're looking at a job saying, well, why are they looking for a doctorate for this? It probably wasn't the people that are actually on the committee that made that decision. That decision is made well above the people that are doing that. And so I think that's something, it can be very frustrating for a lot of people because they see all these jobs come out, doctorate preferred, doctorate required, et cetera. And it's not, the people in the department know that and would value the people that are out playing and getting that experience and knowing that they're out there doing the job and stuff like that. But there's a lot more that goes into it than just that decision-making process.
Yeah, to Tracy's point, literally none of my teachers could get my job because of their degrees. Not one single teacher I had.
You beat Mark Ford. That's impressive.
Not a knock on them, just the degree thing. All my teachers had master's degrees, except for Dr. Shatroma. There's one, but Svet, Mark Ford, William Marsh, none of them.
No, it's crazy. It's like that here as well. Like we had someone with a master's who seemed like they would be a good fit, but we have to have someone with a doctorate to keep our accreditation. And much to that, I don't want to backtrack too much, but there's a post a long time ago, and I won't go into the side tangents that came of it, but about Aaron Trumbore, who got the job at JMU, my former gig, the adjunct one, and people complaining about the rate of pay for for that gig. It ended up being, like 28 to 30,000 a year, I think, approximately, give or take. I can't say for certain anymore because I'm not there. But people laying like, oh, that's insultingly low and blah blah blah. And it's just like, well, yeah, I agree, like totally, like it should be double that. But at the same time, it's like, but that's not, we don't control that. Like that's so far above. That's not even within the school's pay grade. That's the state, like the Commonwealth of Virginia, that that goes up to. And yeah, I think people think departments have a lot more control over things than they do. It's like for us here, we're having a big renovation this summer, and it's it's almost a $2 million acoustic renovation to keep our NASM certification, because our acoustics are not up to the level of a NASM certified school. And suddenly, when that accreditation is threatened, that money comes out of nowhere. It seems like it's like, I guess we did have $1.75 million in the budget to fund this new thing. So
administrations are terrified of accrediting agencies.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, if I could pitch just my 2 cents, I think that in the real world, or in reality, when I listen to people, I don't care at all whether they have this degree or that degree. And I don't think that determines whether they're going to be a good teacher, a good colleague. I think it is incredibly important to be a good player, to be inspiring, because it doesn't matter whether you're teaching kids to read music or to, if they want to go out and have their Carnegie Hall level solo career. I still think that you should be the best that you can be. But I think that there might be good intentions, but I think it's quite flawed to simply disqualify people who don't have doctorates. So there's frequently that term that says sort of like, or sort of commensurate experience or something, which is a very vague term, but says sort of like equivalent experience or a doctorate. So I guess some
which is really fancy for, we can sell it to the administration.
Yeah.
Actually, on that note, the jazz bass professor at the University of North Texas, largest jazz school in the world, his qualifications are he has a high school diploma. And every single year, I guess I've heard they have to file like some ungodly amount of paperwork just to like keep that in the clear or whatever. But yeah, that does happen.
Yeah. Casey doesn't have a doctorate. He's the last person I know of that has, he has a double master's, and he has, of course, a very extensive performing career, but he's the last one I know of that's gotten that tenure track gig. I can't speak to his experiences, but yeah, it's obviously it's still possible. It really just depends on the institution.
Yep, it does. Brady Spitz asked, he said, I would be curious to see what committees actually value in a playing demonstration, what they've been impressed by in the past. It's so hard to demonstrate appropriate musicianship on timpani and drum set, which function much better in an ensemble than as a solo instrument. That the college job search game seems like a marimba and multi-percussion contests sometimes. So, we need to have some cool YouTube videos available or, ready to send to the committee. Do you agree with this? I personally, Brady, so much love to you. I disagree that we can demonstrate musicianship. What I think ends up happening is that people who don't listen to a lot of drum set or timpani or whatever don't quite know how to tune in or listen. They simply don't know how to listen to that stuff always. But also I think that like exceptional levels of musicianship, yeah, you can break down all those barriers. But what do you all think? Is it actually a game of player marimba chops and multi chops for people?
I think I'm one of the few people who actually had a tenured percussion professor as the head of my committee when I applied for my job, since we have 2 tenure track faculty on most instruments here. Most of the time, if you're applying for a vacant percussion position, it's because there isn't a percussion professor there. And so no one knows the standard repertoire for marimba, right? Or whatever. you know, we have an instrument that hasn't been around that long, but in general, I think it's really important to show everything that you can do competently, because if you're the percussion professor, you have to teach all of the percussion. And so, yeah, we can't show that much, you know, musicianship on timpani, but most people who are at this level, who are a musician of any sort and play any instrument, can tell if something sucks, regardless of what instrument someone is playing. And so they're going to watch you play. They might be impressed by it, but you know, if basically the goal is make them not unimpressed, you know, don't give them anything bad to say. If you send a solid timpani video, like no one's sitting there to get their musical, you know, inspiration for the day from your 3-minute timpani video that they're watching on YouTube as part of your application, you know, while waiting for their food at McDonald's or something. Like, yeah, so I think it is important to just show your diversity. But on the other hand, you know, like I'm not a great jazz drum set player. I could have sent a jazz drum set video. I elected not to because I sent a bunch of other videos. And I honestly think if I had sent a jazz drum set video and it was clearly the worst one of the people they were considering, that would have been a negative. And so you can also, I think, sometimes have addition by subtraction. But you do need to show everything that you can do. And as long as the video is of good quality, I think it's okay. I sent a video of me playing in the Brazilian ensemble when I was in school because we played some legit stuff and it was a good performance and I was clearly part of it. And I think that's okay because I can teach kids that if I need to.
I would say along that same lines too is show who you are as a musician and an artist, because you can't, this is a piece of advice I was given. Every single person that's on the committee has a different definition of what a percussionist is and what a percussionist does. And you can't attempt to try to cover all of that in your thing. So the best thing that you can do is be you. And if what you do is of interest to the people that are doing the hiring, then they're going to look further at you. Because, and this goes for like when we eventually like look at like the interview stage and stuff like that too. When you're sitting there and you're doing like a phone call or videos or whatever, you're going to have a flute professor, you're going to have a piano teacher, you might have the guitar teacher, you're going to have the band director, and every single one of those people is going to have a completely different definition of what being a percussion teacher is, what being a percussion performer is. And so the best thing I can say is be you. And if you're what they're looking for, then they're going to keep looking at you.
Yeah, well said. Well said. I am, again, going to respectfully disagree and restate that we should not think of timpani as lesser than, and really just be a stellar musician and don't look down upon any instruments and think that you can't express yourself there. Caleb, I think you have some thoughts.
Just a short one.
Go.
I feel like the people we've interviewed, and when I did my interview as well, like I did the Silence Must Be, the Terry DeMay solo conductor piece at my interview here. And that was the big joke, right? Because two of the people on the committee were the conducting staff here. I was like, oh, I'm doing a piece for solo conductor. And they're like, yeah, it's fun. What are you really playing? I was like, no, like, yeah, okay. Yeah,
no, actually.
I don't know what you're expecting, but I'm not kidding around. But beforehand, I gave a good 3 to 4 minute talk about, hey, this is the juxtaposition of 5 against 3, and it starts with checking your pulse with your thumb versus your wrist, which have contrary pulses, and the whole thing is these two things trying to come together. And I gave a little talk about why it was important. I feel like if you're playing excerpts, you would do the same thing. If you're playing Kiji, you would say, hey, this is the excerpt. This is why it's important to percussion. Here is how I would incorporate it into, my playing and my teaching. And, I think there's nothing wrong with explaining yourself. It's a demonstration of your ability, it's not a solo show.
I think also if you can come up with a really clever way to frame it, which is sort of what Caleb's talking about, but there's that guy, and I wish I could remember his name, Marco. I think he's an IU grad. you might be able to help me out. But he has this video. It was like timpani karaoke, basically, and it's like an 8-minute video of every timpani excerpt with a backing track. And so he plays through. He's pedaling like crazy, and it's like, yeah, that's so impressive and demonstrating literally every timpani excerpt you can think of. Marco, do you know who I'm talking about? Does that ring a bell?
I don't, but that's kind of like what Kevin Bobo has done with the marimba solos. So
Yeah, Kevin Bobo has those 31 reasons why. I was actually just watching that last night.
There's also the excerpt etude for snare drum that does the same thing.
But yeah, I think it's like a John Tafoya sort of thing in general to do. I think John Tafoya actually calls it timpani karaoke. But yeah, like if you can like demonstrate every timpani excerpt along with the recording that you put together, like a spliced together thing that, like, I think that's very impressive and would totally impress a committee. And also the trumpet player is probably going to enjoy your orchestral excerpts a lot more than your, contemporary marimba solo. As a lover of contemporary marimba solos myself. So yeah, I don't, maybe it's just my viewpoint is skewed, but I think that, yeah, you probably can't sit there and just play, the Mozart 39 timpani excerpt unaccompanied and expect people to be impressed by that. But I think a little bit of innovation could go a long way in showcasing your musicality there.
Yeah, I agree. I disagree. I love this. I think this is great. I was just gonna say we also had a search here that I did not get to see all of, but I went to meet every candidate and I tried to show up for every recital to see them. And one thing that I did notice was that there was a person who was really promising, and all these things that you mentioned, like they had a beautiful presentation, like paperwork was amazing. I thought they were very sweet to speak to. And then came the recital, and as Marco said, try not to unimpress people. I have not seen a more boring, like lifeless, really sad performance. And it was correct, it was fine, but it was so boring that I was in shock, especially because I felt the contrast between what they were promising through that paperwork and what all they do, and how much they travel and how much they perform versus how they sound was just like, oh my God. So Caleb says Ksenija needs a glass of wine, maybe 2 for this.
One of them Serbian liquors or something.
Siberian. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
No, I found the video I was talking about. It's by I might be mispronouncing this name, Eric Ripple, ERICE.
Oh yeah, he's timpanist of the Minnesota Orchestra.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
he was a
video
junior
title,
when I was a master student.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, the video title is "Crazy Excerpts" compiled by John Tafoya. So, but yeah, go check that out. And like, if you could do that in a recital or in a demonstration, playing demonstration on a university thing, I think you have the gig at that point. I mean, it's crazy good and very clever.
Shout out to Eric Ripple because he is amazing at timpani.
Yeah, it's we should actually just pause the podcast right now and I'll go watch that video, and then it's that good. But we won't.
Yeah. Do your research when you pick what you're gonna send, but also ultimately I really agree with Tracy. Be yourself. I see now in the chat a lot of people say, don't play Bach in an audition. I was advised to do the same. I played Bach in my audition. Why? Because I am really passionate about that stuff. And while I understand I could be offending a string faculty, I hope that my love and admiration for it shines through. So you could make controversial choices, but also think about it. I think it's awesome that your recital gets to be short, like it's 30 minutes or whatever. That's awesome. You're not going to bore anyone to death. Pick the best parts of the music. It's as diverse as possible. Don't stay on one instrument for too long, and just like go. You can showcase the best parts of yourself, which is amazing, I think.
Hey, can I ask, since we have a good array of people, what some of the rep people played on their little mini recital was? Maybe Ksenija?
Yeah, so I played Bach G minor Adagio from the G minor violin sonata. I played Velocities. I played Stop Speaking. I played an excerpt from Songs 1 through 9, and I played Saida. And that's it. Everybody else?
I played variations on Japanese children's songs because I wanted something marimba-y and powerful. I played Stop Speaking because that has concert and rudimental elements, and it's sort of chamber music because you're playing with the recording. And I did Aphasia because I wanted something totally weird that made me stand out and look like a different person. And actually, I was just telling a student in a lesson today that when I played Aphasia, I tripped over my chair as I was getting seated for the piece, and then went through the whole piece, played it. And then in the middle of my teaching demonstration, the student made a mistake and kind of winced. And I was like, yeah, like we all make mistakes. Like if you don't advertise them, then no one will know. And I was like, who here by the end of my performance remembered that I tripped over the chair sitting down to play Aphasia? And everyone was like, wait, you did. I told you, I didn't remember. So yeah, even something going wrong in a performing demonstration, you can make an example out of.
Yeah, well said. I also played Rebon. I just want to say that I don't want to forget my buddy Xenakis.
You played what?
Rebon B. Ray-Bans.
Ray-Bans.
Oh, Ray-Bans.
Rebound.
Ray-Bans.
Reeboks.
If that's
I
not
think
the Instagram clip.
One of the tough parts about the audition recital too is that like if you already have like a life, for me, when I was auditioning for tenure track positions, I was already working my job at Tennessee Tech and I was very busy. You have to be able to put it together in the amount of time from when you find out. And so I guess I actually still had a pretty full concert, but for me, it was a little more, I don't know if necessarily conservative is the word, but easy to put together. For me, I did one of my own marimba pieces. I did music for a video game. Not the whole thing because it's really long, but I did, select movements that people would go ooh and ah. And then I also played a Bach movement and I did the B minor Sarabande first partita. I ended with that so I could show them after all the booming and crashing that I could also make a musical line. And then I did one of my own multiple percussion pieces. I did the last movement of Thracian rhythm. And then I did 9 Lives by Anthony Di Bartolo on snare drum because I didn't want to risk electronics. That was a big thing for me. I don't want to do electronics when I'm traveling to a new place for that reason. And then I played 2 movements of Graham Wedham's Suite for Timpani, which I think is a more tuneful and enjoyable unaccompanied timpani piece that the non-percussionist would also enjoy.
I love the Wedham. That's one of my favorite timpani pieces. Let's see. I did Wind in the Bamboo Grove, the Abe Etude Homage 2 on marimba. I do a solo version of Pyro Bowl, the John Bergamo piece that I can like use like frame drums and like turn it into like a multi-percussion sort of thing that is pretty easy to pull like I bring the drums, I can pretty easily pull together like a kick drum and some other stuff for the pieces for it. Nancy Zeltzman's timpani solo, which is gorgeous and not played very often. Quattro Quattro by Nancy Zeltzman is a timpani solo.
Is that published?
Yes.
Wow, never heard of it.
And it's to me, it's exactly what you think Nancy Zeltzman writing a timpani solo would be. It's melodic, it's groovy, it's got a lot of room for like different touch and stuff like that. So I've played that on like auditions and stuff also. The Excerpt Etude, it's fun to play and it's really easy to be like, now I'm going to play you it's like what we were talking about with the timpani piece. I'm now going to play you all of the orchestral excerpts on snare drum in this one piece. So that has always worked pretty well for me in like that sort of situation also.
So I just wanted to add, I guess, one thing to remember about the performance videos and the in-person recital, should you be fortunate enough to get to give one, is that you're being judged by the students, obviously, but also a committee of people who are very well-learned, knowledgeable, and talented musicians, even if they don't necessarily play their instrument. They can tell if you're doing a good job or not, but they are also really good musicians, which means that they have opinions and sometimes strong ones. So when you get this, I've been on a committee where we had a complete disagreement over who played the best, where I'm like, honestly, there was a situation where I'm like, this person was actually kind of awful. And one of the other people agreed with me, but then 3 other people had them as their top choice without any question. And I was like, how did that even happen? Like, I very much trust all of your opinions because you're all amazing at this, but what did you hear? And that's going to happen to you. When you play, someone is going to hate what you played. That's just going to happen, and someone's going to freaking love it. It's just most important, I think, to express the best that you are. You know, whatever you are, whoever you are personally, that's the most important part, because you want them to hire you.
I did the Terry DeMay Silence Must Be, Casey's Etude in E minor, one of my 2 mallet solos, Drift, just to show off some of my writing and 2 mallet chops, and then some Joe Tompkins etudes, because I think those are pretty good. I don't know about y'all, but yeah, all 4 of those pieces I prefaced with a good like 60-second like, hey, here's why this is cool, and here this is why this matters to me and how it affects my teaching and performance. But yeah.
Yeah, I actually made program notes for mine. Just short, but yeah.
Oh, whatever. I curated my outfit change so that this could be the best and reflects the music.
Yeah, but you play Le Bon. None of us played Le Bon. Le Bon Ba or Le Bon Ah?
Well, this room is full of smarty pants, isn't it? Thank you all so much. We're definitely going to continue this conversation because there are other elements. There's the interview portion, which there's definitely stuff for all of us to learn. The what to do during the Zoom interview, which, as we said, is sort of like a prescribed list of questions, and there are correct answers. But then sort of what to do on campus, I think we should discuss all of that. So I appreciate you all. Thanks for sharing your experiences and knowledge, and we will see you and talk to you listeners in a week. See you in episode 326. Thanks everyone. Kisses. Bye.
Kisses. Bye.
Kisses. Bye.